So welcome to the Filmmakers podcast.
Thank you.
I mean, this is incredible what they've done with the sets like everywhere.
I know.
You
Unbelievable.
must be very excited to be sort of immersed in this. Like, this is all your work.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal. Yeah.
So how are you feeling? I mean, I've just watched the first couple of episodes of this
Cool.
series. I've been following it since the inception. I love the show. It's like everything that I sort of grew up enjoying as well.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, sort of being at that stage of? It must be a little bit bittersweet, sort of coming to the end of it.
It is. It's funny though. We were just talking to some of our cast last night. We're all in this space where we're in a little bit of denial. We know it's coming, but because we're still talking about the show, we're still hanging out and doing press. Matt and I still actually have work to do on the show. Once New Year's Day comes around and there's nothing else to do on it, I think it's going to hit pretty hard. Ending production was hard, but since then, I've been trying to ignore the fact that it's all over.
By immersing ourselves in work. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Heads in the sand. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been so many years, isn't it? So it's
almost 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just chat before we get fully into Stranger Things. I'd love to sort of talk about how you got into the inception, because we're a filmmaking podcast.
Right.
Like, this is one of the biggest, probably the biggest show on Netflix for filmmakers. I think this is probably everyone's dream, is to sort of land a show that's this big and this successful and this well received. So it would just be great to sort of hear a little bit about how all that started off. And like, I know you did a couple of shorts, and then you did a feature film, and you did some show writing.
Yes.
And then this sort of came. So how did the whole thing sort of start?
Well, we weren't initially interested at all in television. So we grew up. I mean, it's probably apparent watching the show. But we're movie guys. I mean, we grew up wanting to do movies. Yeah, exactly. So our dream was to do movies, and we were able to make a movie. We wrote a script called Hidden, and Warner Brothers. It was meant to be made independently, and then Warner Brothers bought it and allowed us to direct it, which was pretty incredible. I mean, it didn't cost a lot of money, and then Warner Brothers had no idea what to do with it, so they dumped it. So it was kind of, it felt like that moment where you're desperate to get let into the party, they let you in, and then they go, well, this was a mistake. And then real imposter syndrome kind of kicked in, and Ross and I started to run out of money that we had made from that movie, and then luckily M. Night Shyamalan had read that script that we wrote for Warner Brothers, which was kind of ripping him off a little bit, but he liked it, and he hired us for a show called Wayward Pines, and through working on that, we learned television, and we got the credits that made it look like we knew how to television worked more than anything, and we had this TV idea, right? It felt like nobody. It was like every meeting we went to, nobody was interested in our movie ideas, and they kept asking for TV. And the reason I think we became interested in TV at that point, aside from thinking, well, it'll be easier to get a TV show off the ground, was we saw that landscape changing, right? We saw The Nick, it was a Steven Soderbergh show, which is great, where he directed every single episode, so it had a real filmmaker's point of view. It felt like a long-form movie. We had seen the ad for True Detective, and the True Detective wasn't out, but we could see that something was coming and changing. It looked like a movie. It was shot on film director, film stars. And so we went, I think, something's happening here. House of Cards, David Fincher, on Netflix. So we went, okay, let's try to jump onto this bandwagon.
So the development of Stranger Things, like how long had you had sort of general ideas? Had it ever been a movie before it became a TV series?
It was like the very kernel of the idea was a film, a discarded film idea. It was during the time of where found footage was a big deal. So we were just spitballing a bunch of ideas, and we wrote them all down. It's a reminder to write down your ideas, even the ones you're not sure about or that don't click. And it was based basically a found footage film set in the 80s about something called the Montauk Project, which was a conspiracy theory in Montauk, New York, and it involved portals and to other dimensions and monsters and experiments on people and children, and it all was an offshoot of MK Ultra. So we thought was a cool premise, but we weren't fans of found footage, and we didn't really know what to do with that idea, so we just discarded it. And then we saw the film Prisoners,
one of the
Denis
best.
Villeneuve. Which,
I mean, this must have been
such
like
a good drama,
5
yeah.
years later. By the
5
way.
years later, yeah. So that was, we just put that away, shoved it in a drawer. We saw Prisoners many years later, and as we were walking out, it was during this time of television, like Matt was saying, where we felt the tide turning, and we said, well, wouldn't it be interesting, we love Prisoners in the tone, and we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see a story about a kidnapped child, but that was a longer form movie, because we could have kept watching Prisoners with those actors in that tone for another 6 hours easily. And we got excited about that, but as, nerds, we went back to our, old idea of monsters and said, well, what if it's a supernatural kidnapping? And then we started thinking about Poltergeist, and it just sort of, it snowballed from there, but it came together actually pretty quickly once we sort of smushed these two ideas together.
I love Prisoners as a reference. I mean, that's just like perfect thriller in my books. Like,
I just read it inspired Weapons as well.
yeah, I can see that. I can really see that. Yeah, like the whole visual sort of language.
Yeah.
So okay, so I mean that's some great sort of you've got all your childhood references.
Yeah.
You've got these two sort of things you're putting together. So how did that then get to Netflix commissioning you? Like, what was the pitching process? Like, what did you actually have at that stage?
Well, we wrote the script, which we normally are quite slow, but that came very quickly, which we thought was a good sign.
Pilot or like the whole
Pilot,
series?
just
Okay.
the pilot. We just had one script. We developed a pitch book. It was about, you can actually find it online. It's floating around somewhere. It's about 20 pages, a lot of pictures of films from the 80s. And that was all we had. We sent it around to various producers. And we ended up landing at kind of, well, I won't go into the full history, but so we ended up landing with a surprising producer, which was Sean Levy, because and his company 21 Laps. And Sean Levy was known for mostly family films, like Night at the Museum.
They'd never done television.
Never done television, never done genre.
But we knew his producer, Dan Cohen, who was, again, just a general meeting from years ago, but he spoke our language. He's just a movie nerd. And we loved all the same movies. His favorite movie's Breaking Away. And we just connected with Dan. And so he immediately read the script, understood it. We didn't know Sean at the time, but then Sean read the script and we met with him, and he just loved the project. And again,
they got it, right?
There were other companies that made more sense from just sort of, because again, at the time he hadn't done any television, was not known for the horror genre or anything scary at all or serious. But we just knew he understood the script and he believed in us. And so from then, once we brought them on, we took it around to the town and just got a bunch of no's.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what has made the show successful, that was exactly why we were getting no's, right? So I remember a lot of the concern was the fact that it was set in the 1980s. We were told nobody wants a period piece, and certainly nobody wants anything set in the 1980s. And
Which is laughable now, right?
Yeah, I know. And then the other part of it was that it was a show starring kids that was not for kids. So that was also something, because there had been nothing like that had been successful. I mean, hadn't been tried though. That was kind of my point. So I remember the end of that first week after we got like our 10th rejection, including from FX. I think FX hurt the most because we had just we thought we had a real chance there because we had just done that Shyamalan show with them, Wayward Pines, and we had a great experience. So that once they passed, I kind of deflated. I thought that was kind of the end. Our agent called us and said, I remember he said, "This is, listen, it's a special project, and we'll find a special home for it." And I went, "What is wrong with our child?" It's our, and then somehow, suddenly, it was kind of a lot of luck involved. But because we had one of our agents was meeting with an executive from Netflix about a completely separate project, and the Netflix executive said, one of the things they're looking for is something starring younger characters that's in the supernatural space. And then he goes, might have the script for you. So anyway, long story short, we ended up at
Didn't happen very
ended up at
quickly.
Netflix. It happened quick.
Very quickly from that moment on. Because we didn't even submit the script to Netflix
No.
because we thought, or our agents at the time, because they had only done House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. We were just like, there's not even a chance in hell they would do this. But what we didn't know is that they were on the cusp of about to produce a ton of content, and so once they found this show, which filled this void that they felt they needed, they quickly not only bought the project but greenlit it straight to series. So really, for us, it was his dream come true.
Yeah, and then it became like a flagship. I mean, that must have been an incredible moment.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? Was it scary? Like, I suppose Netflix wasn't, as expansive as it is now back then.
Oh,
but
not even close.
But it was still, it still had money and it still had, a lot behind it. Like, what was your sort of mental process when you were like, okay, this is happening? I mean, did you have to go into like exec meetings? Did you have to like rustle up the, more episodes in the writing? Like, what was that sort of first?
No, it was just a new sensation. It was something we had only experienced the opposite, which was like complete and utter
Despair.
failure.
Am I gonna
You
get
know
my
what I
next
mean?
thing made?
But in retrospect, I'm glad because it made you sort of appreciate it more, and it kept our egos in check. So, like, you're constantly still a little bit. You know what failure feels like, and you're still feeling like that could come at any moment, and so there was a lot of excitement, and that it was connecting with people in the way that it did. But then also a terror quickly set in because you're going, well, can we do this again? Because it kind of felt a little bit like a lightning in a bottle situation. So we pretty quickly set about working on a second season, and we had not really honestly thought about the show beyond a first season. So we had to actually start really mapping out what would be a potentially long-running show, like further develop the mythology and so forth. So, I mean, it's not like we didn't have rough ideas, but they were very rough in terms of a sentient evil behind it. What is that sentient evil? So we started working with our writers to kind of lay a foundation for what became now, a long-running show.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask that because each obviously there's the overarching theme and the feel and the mood, and it would be great to sort of get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
But each season has a very specific kind of flavor, and they all sort of have their own like mini themes that are sort of going on. Like, the tone shifts a little bit, or we go into another sort of direction. So like. Yeah, what was the sort of process like? What were you trying to achieve with the first season, and then what was the the end goal, I suppose, in like making sure each season feels different, but you're working towards something?
Well, I think some of that comes out of us looking at the movie sequels, not television shows, but movie sequels, and what are the successful ones, and specifically, the first ones that obviously come to mind are for us are Cameron's, Aliens and T2, which is you're not losing what is at the heart of those series, but you're taking it in new directions, and you are changing in sometimes the tone in a way. And so I think a mistake that people tend to make with films is they're trying to build out an expansive universe, but they haven't even made one good film yet. And you've got to make a good film. So with each season, yes, we have some, long-term things that we want to achieve over the course of the series, but mostly we're going, how do we make the best season that we can possibly make now? And how do we make it something we're excited, a story that we're excited to tell? And part of that is going, well, we're going to change it up. It would have been so simple and easy to take the blueprint of season 1 and just rinse and repeat and do like Home Alone 2 and just do it again and again and again. But if we had done that, I'm pretty confident that we would not be here 10 years later talking to you. The show would have just slowly, it would have been diminishing returns. And so we just wanted to keep shaking it up, keep taking chances and swing for the fences. And of course, not every chance you take works out perfectly, but I think that's much more interesting than if you just are you're just repeating the same thing over and over again.
So let's talk a little bit about the actors, because they're obviously really pivotal to this.
Yeah.
And I feel like that also sort of plays in. I mean, obviously Millie's the kind of. I remember the first time I watched her on screen in season 1, I was like, whoa. This is...
Yeah.
unbelievable. But then, in other seasons, you've got sort of the Billy and, that kind of dynamic, and each new sort of character sort of works very well in tandem with the new theme. So, I mean, let's talk about how you got Millie sort of involved in the first place.
Yeah.
And your casting process.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew that the show was going to work or not, depending on the cast, specifically the kids. Like, you know what I mean? And you see so many child actors who feel like they're acting. So that was our big thing. Okay, we needed to make sure this doesn't feel like the Disney Channel, right? So you're looking for kids who feel very authentic. So we started actually casting when we had did we have 2 scripts? 1 to 2 scripts. So we started very, very early looking for these kids. I mean, there's not a ton of them. Like I always go, it wasn't actually that challenging in the sense that you don't have 5 kids and you're going, which one of these could be Dustin? You just found Gaten, and it's like, that's it, right? And that's Dustin. We only had 2 to 3 young actors who we thought could potentially pull off 11, and then you just brought them into a room, and I just remember, and the 11 was a challenging role in that very little dialogue. So it was all in the face and all in the eyes, right? And a lot of kids can't focus, right? A lot of kids, I mean, that's kind of how you tell whether a kid can act or not. Do they drop in and out of a scene? Did they just memorize their dialogue, spit out that dialogue, and then are they listening? And so you have to find an actor who's really listening. And so, and that's where Millie shone, right? I mean, she was incredibly in the moment, no matter what was going on, and there was so much going on in the eyes, and it became very clear that that this girl was special and that she was the one.
It was really in filming she was good in her audition tape, and obviously that's where we brought her in to read her. But it was actually getting just a close up of her on camera and seeing it in her eyes. It's so strange nowadays. Auditions are so much of it's over Zoom, and I think it's a mistake because it was us being in a room with her, getting an actual close-up of her, and she was just like, it was just one of the scene where she puts on a wig for the first time, and just seeing it in close-up, and it was just chills.
And like Finn going, pretty.
It was just magical.
Do you have any tips for working with children?
Yeah, I mean, the tip is which is, I think it's all in finding the right kid. I think some people make a mistake, which is, I can pull a good performance out of them. First of all, there's no time on television to do that. We wouldn't even know how to do it. You cast it, you treat them respectfully. So, you treat them like adults. If they have opinions, you listen to them, and you stay out of their way as much as possible. And make sure the atmosphere feels relaxed. So that it's not tense.
Fun, I guess, as well.
And fun. Yeah, we did try to have fun.
Play, I suppose.
There is a sense of fun and joke, and we don't want them to feel pressured. And if they get into giggle fits, you're not like, what are you doing? Like,
there's no scolding.
There's fun there, but when you're giving a note, for the scene, we're giving a note as if we were talking to David Harbour. We're not really. There's no difference, and I think that they step up to the level that you want them to if you just treat them respectfully. You're not like bending down and being like you don't need to treat them like
adult
children.
Voice. Yeah.
No, they were 11. They're smart kids. You can treat them like adults. And like Matt said, if they have a thought on the scene, I mean, they know what it's like to be a kid. They were kids, so you listen to it and you adjust accordingly.
Mostly, it's if the only difference between them and working with a kid and an adult is like, there's focus difficulties sometimes. So you have to just be like, guys, let's just, focus for, 10 seconds.
Yeah, we sort of teach kids in a film school as well in London, and what I've found is just the imagination, and I guess the removal from reality like kids have is so incredible to watch. Like they don't sort of focus on the adult problems. When they go into something, like
they can completely, the good ones can completely lose themselves. And also, like, a big reference for us is the Goonies, because I remember when we saw that
as well.
We saw that when we were really young. We saw that we were the age of the kids in that, and in that film when we saw it for the first time, and it was the first film I think that we saw that really captured how the dynamic that we had with our friends and the way we spoke. I mean, it's messy. There's a certain messiness to it, but it felt very authentic. They're talking over each other. They're cursing, etc. So that we wanted to do our best to capture that feeling.
The one note that we would give the most, and the only challenge that I remember working with them is sometimes, I mean, you know, they're kids and they're working I can't remember the hours that were allowed at that age. It's something like 8 hours, but sometimes they were just really tired, and so they would forget that they're tired, and you would do the scene, it would just be dead, and you would just go remind them that you just go like times 20, like whatever you just did times 20, and then they would be like, oh yeah, it's just like they forgot that they were in a scene, and then they would just snap to, and it was great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. We mentioned the Goonies. Like I loved those sort of films growing up. That E.T., like those sort of charming 80s movies, and I love that you sort of brought this back. And I feel like you did sort of start a bit of a renaissance of 80s 90s charm.
Right.
How did you get into the setting such a specific mood and the blending of like horror and the 80s and the action thriller and the the kid friendship movies? Like what was the process in terms of building that from the very first instance?
Well, I mean, when we were building, and it's mentioned in our lookbook where we were talking about different types of movies that each generation in that season was in, and that was part of what excited us about telling this as a television show, because we're like, we can do something that a movie could never do. A movie could tell one of these stories. They could tell the story of Hopper, they could tell the story of the kids, or they could tell the story of the teens, but they certainly couldn't do all three, and they couldn't mash them all together. So
there's just not enough time.
There's not enough time. So we saw as like Jonathan and Nancy were like, they're in Nightmare on Elm Street. That's the movie that they're in. The kids are in E.T. They're in a totally separate movie from our teens. And then the adults are in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So everyone is in their separate movie, and we love the idea of just weaving all of those together, and you're mixing and mashing, and they all come together to form a coherent whole. But we loved, and that's sort of where we started to come up with this idea that each season and each storyline is in its own genre, and that allows you to pivot very quickly from something like, you're in a romantic comedy, and then suddenly the next minute you're in a straight up horror movie, and we love that swinging of tones.
Can we talk a little bit about this season specifically? Because I mean, there's some really heavy bullying sort of scenes which again feel really authentic. But I mean, I guess I sort of remember most of the Rosie stuff, and I forget the violence. There is violence in the other series, but this feels like it's like, okay, we're taking this really seriously, and the stakes are like super high, and maybe there is like a bit of like heaviness to certain sort of aspects. And obviously the scale of what's going to be your sort of finale. Like, what was the decision specifically in terms of like how you wanted to set this mood for this season, particularly?
Well, I think what you were saying is the stakes have to be higher, right? Because it's the
highest.
It's as high as you can go, right? Because because it is the final season. I would say the show's kind of gotten, like, I guess, a little bit increasingly dark, but I mean, it was important for us to not lose those fun moments. We wanted to recapture some of the spirit of season one, which is why we introduced a new younger cast into the show, because our kids in the show are obviously not kids, and the only way to do that and capture that tone was to bring in a younger cast as well. So we're hopefully we're able to capture all the various tones from all the seasons. Often we're going. We wanted to take sort of the best of the best from all the seasons and kind of merge it into one, and because we've learned so much about the show over 10 years. We've learned the things that work the best, the things that don't work so well. So you're trying to take all those lessons and apply it here.
So, I mean, I was really excited by that new story thread. Is it Nell? Is that the actor?
Yeah, Nell. Yeah.
So that is completely different to anything I've seen in the series so far, and I really like it. It's almost like a surreal, like, looks happy, but it's obviously like sinister in its own way. That feels like a really new, like, plot thread, and I'm fascinated by that sort of that journey into that sort of cozy but scary world.
Yeah, that was our, we always want to take a swing with every season. And like I said, sometimes it's worked out, sometimes it hasn't, but that's our big swing this time, which is, we've played around a lot with memory and dreams and things like that throughout the show, but we really wanted to just go, well, what if we just fully dive in this year? Because there's nothing to me creepier than something like that. We talked a lot about The Cell, Tarsum's The Cell, and sort of when you're in the mind of a serial killer and what does that feel like. And we love the idea of something, yes, that looks cozy, but there's just something off about it. And that can feel very nightmarish in its own way, and just as scary as, a big CG monster, or scarier.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm really sort of excited to see sort of how that pans out.
Yeah.
So just a little bit about music, maybe, because that's obviously another huge part of the show. Like, how do you pick tracks for, the original soundtrack, leaning into that sort of side of things? Like, where does that all come from?
I mean, just talking about the score for a second, like that, was one of the things I think we decided on very, very early on, which is that we wanted to have a synth score, and part of that was us feeling like we weren't going to have a big budget for a large orchestra, and it was always going to feel like sort of second-rate John Williams, that we were never going to compete with that. And it always feel like kind of was never going to reach that level, so it was going to be disappointing. And we started to play around when we developed kind of a sizzle reel to help sell the show, and we threw some John Carpenter music on top of E.T., and it was cool. I mean, first of all, it's not that hard to turn E.T. into a horror film because it's kind of creepy as it is, but it really made it quite scary. And we thought that was it was a really good, cool tone. So that was kind of a proof of concept where we go, oh, this is cool. So we found these synth composers, Kyle and Michael, who, I guess they weren't really composers. They just had a synth band. They were selling used synthesizers, and we brought them on to compose. And I think that gave the show, a unique identity. We're really into film music, and we think that that it's such an essential part of cinema, of cinema and visual storytelling. So anyway, so we spent a long time, and we continue to spend a long time on music. I would say even in editorial, about 50% of our time in there is spent on music and finding the right music.
And then soundtrack, we try to, I think the most effective uses of the soundtrack is when we're writing into the script, as in we're tying it into both character and the narrative.
Like Running Up the Hill.
Running Up the Hill being the most obvious example, but we started in season 1 with The Clash, Should I Stay, Should I Go? And we've tried to sort of continue that, of making sure when we're doing occasionally we'll do a needle drop on a scene and just be like, well, this just feels, cool, Africa by Toto or whatever. We'll be like, well, it's just it's a great song, and we just want to put it in there. But generally, the most success that we've had, Running Up the Hill being the biggest success, is you're going, this is fitting for Max in her emotional arc and character journey, and also narratively, because it's how she's able to escape Vecna in his mindscape. So that's what we're really trying to do with each season, and this season's the same way. There's a bunch of big songs that were written into the script specifically, and that comes about letting the narrative tell us what the song should be, as opposed to just going, I'm nostalgic for this song, or I really like this one.
Nice, that's amazing. So just to finish off, last question. Was there we've touched on it a little bit earlier, was there any point in your careers where you thought, I'm not sure if this is going to happen?
Oh my God.
Like, what did you do to get past that? Because obviously you're now at a stage where you've done some really amazing work, but
I mean, your 20s were hard, are hard, especially because it was hard to get people to take you seriously. And Ross and I we're not from Hollywood. We didn't know anybody in Hollywood, so we spent a long time just trying to make connections and trying to meet the right people, trying to find a way to get an agent, and we just kept hacking. And I always, we didn't have a safety net, and we had nowhere to go, which I think it was terrifying, but I think that was helpful because if we kind of gave up, we were absolutely screwed. We had developed no skills beyond this one skill. We wrote a lot of really bad scripts. And so you just, I think you have to keep working. I was like, we just wrote. We wrote on the weekends. We wrote a bunch of crap until finally we wrote something we thought worked. It was pretty clear, I think, when we wrote the first script that worked, which was Hidden, and we went, oh, I think we can get this made. But then we did get it made, and so your career is filled with up.
But I would say the two things that we did that changed our lives, which was writing Hidden, which is the first script that we sold, and then Stranger Things, both came at extreme low points in moments of desperation.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. There's something to be.
You know what it was though? Whenever I'm talking to people who are trying to break in. First of all, like you got to be able to handle rejection. We know a lot of it feels very personal and hurtful when you're rejected, because you pour your heart into this. But the other thing that we were doing that was a mistake for the longest time is we were writing we were obsessed with what was selling in the industry. We'd read Deadline and Hollywood Reporter, and we'd see what specs were selling and so on. And so we were writing and what movies were working. And this is how we were developing a found footage movie, and then we didn't like found footage. And when we first found success was when we stopped paying attention to any of that. At a certain point, I said, I'm not going to look at the trades anymore. And we just wrote what we thought was cool and what we were interested in. And the first time we did that, we wrote Hidden. It wrote itself very easily because we were writing something that we loved and were passionate about. And then that sold. So and then Stranger Things obviously made no sense in the marketplace, which again a lot of people told us. One of our agents said to eliminate the kids.
Yeah.
So you just don't listen to that.
Yeah.
And just write what you love.
That's amazing advice to end on. Thank you so much.
Yes,
It's been such a wonderful chat.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.